Well, thank you so much for having me here. Thanks to ConsenSys for bringing me out. I flew in from Senegal yesterday, so a little groggy. But as I was saying to some people here, it's just been amazing to have this community embrace us from day one. We founded BitPesa in October 2013. We were one of the very first companies in a lot of the blockchain portfolios. We were certainly one of the very first ones on the continent. And from literally the first minute I started this, I had Skypes, I had WhatsApps, I had calls from all around the world, people like you coming from the community to help us out. And I don't know if that would have happened in any other technology. So thank you. And I'm really glad to be here 4 years later. So what is BitPesa? We are an African company. Now you can hear from my voice, I'm from Queens. And my parents are born in Brooklyn, went to school in Manhattan, but I've lived abroad for 15 years, and you could say I don't exactly have a typical path to my life, but something that I've been really passionate about for the last decade is to build an African company for African consumers and businesses, and really move at the pace of Africa. And let's talk a little bit about what I mean when I say move with Africa. So TIA, you'll see this on Twitter. This is Africa. This is what we say when we're upset and when we're quite excited about what's going on. These are some of the favorite places I know across the continent: Joburg, Lagos, Abidjan, Nairobi, Dar es Salaam. I've lived in 4 of these places, and I've seen the growth over the last decade. And when I speak to other African entrepreneurs and businesses and investors in this space, we're all on the same page. This is what we see. This is what we're building for. Yet, I think you know what I mean when this is sometimes what I come back with. And granted, as I said before, I'm from Queens. I am used to rolling my eyes. But it's not just Americans that think this. I'd say that I have people from all over the world. They ask me questions like, do you have shampoo over there? What do you eat? And they're aghast that I have my children in school, and they go to kindergarten. They act like normal kids anywhere else. So what does this mean when we have this one image of TIA, the growth story of Africa, the beautiful boom of an incredibly diverse and exciting continent, and this is still the image that we have so much later? So how did this whole start? How did I get into this? Well, like any third-generation immigrant, my parents pushed me to make as much money as possible. So I went into investment banking, and I speak a bunch of languages, so I ended up in Zurich, which at the time for Credit Suisse was the central hub for global FX. So the centralizing all the operations and bringing it down there. And this little cute, quaint town has this kind of level of complexity, and it was at the edge of the financial crisis, so I guess some of you might think that there was too much complexity or over-complexity, unneeded complexity in the financial system. But how does a small, arguably perfectly run little government attract such diversification of financial products? And how come an amazing, booming, exciting, fantastic place like Lagos attract something like this for their financial services? And I'm not overdoing it. Many of the banks that we work with, and I'm actually a Nigerian resident, still cash-based. And when I came to sub-Saharan Africa in 2009, I worked in microfinance. And a lot of what I worked with these banks across the region was, how do we increase operational efficiency when you're still cash-based? 10 years later, there's a 12-lane highway running through my old apartment in Nairobi, and I'm the poorest person in every neighborhood I live in, yet we're still seeing this cash. Well, why aren't we seeing this diversification come down here? And maybe some of you have done your reading and are a little bit more open-minded, and you say, but Elizabeth, what is this thing called mobile money? M-Pesa, duh, that clearly solved all the problems on the continent. We had one innovation 10 years ago, and it was exciting, but let's talk a little bit about what that is. Mobile money is basically the ATM card for a lot of economies in sub-Saharan Africa. It's a last mile, it's a domestic solution, but it's an analog solution. It was great for 2005. It's clearly a tool that a lot of big brands use, but even when you have the system in Kenya, it doesn't have any interoperability with the system in Tanzania. So you have the same company, same product, you can't send money between Kenya and Tanzania, which are basically like New York and New Jersey. Now, how come 10 years later, nobody's taken this idea and innovated it further? And nobody's realized that these booming economies need FX products. How can we have 50+ currencies and we still only trade spot at most Nigerian banks? And that's where we come in. We saw the need to solve the fundamental mismatch with the FX markets in Africa, which, as I've seen before, are the engine of growth for a lot of the businesses across the region. So You've seen maybe at some other conferences a lot about remittances and the cost of remittances, but remittances are really just one aspect of the billions of dollars of inflows that go into the continent. So we know hard currencies flow into the continent from foreign direct investment. Of course, there's the remittance and all the donors from UNICEF, all of the oil-based economies. There's a lot of hard currencies flowing into the region. But there's a ton of local currencies circulating. And honestly, this image could be reduced to just Somalia, where you have 10 currencies alone, just in one currency. So why aren't we making a market here? Well, duh. I mean, these are like niche markets. There's low liquidity. There's unstable governments. The currencies are changing all the time. We could write a book about why people don't make a market for that. Fine. But we still have that problem. The whole system now depends on correspondent banks that use that US dollar as an intermediary. So all the hard currencies going in and all the hard currencies going out. So every kind of local currency, any kind of African currency, is now beholden to that one correspondent bank, that one bridge, linking it to the rest of the world. And I could see all the lovers of decentralization in the room shaking their heads. This is a horrible idea. One bottleneck depending the fate of the whole continent. So we know, we've seen it, 9% in fees, at least 12 days lost in transfers. Currently I'm living in Senegal, which uses the CFA, and it's pegged to the euro, and it still costs me 12% to move between a European bank account and a Senegalese bank account in 2 weeks. So you can imagine what that does with the inefficiencies coming in for aid or even businesses across the continent. And that's even if you can do it. What happens if there's a USD shortage, which there are in many countries across the region, like Nigeria, one of the biggest markets? And what happens when there are currency controls, like in Tanzania or in Senegal, which you can't send money out? You can't even use this antiquated system. You're totally stuck. SWIFT, which I normally don't quote, had a really crazy report where they said that 39% of flows coming out of Africa wheeled their way through the US dollar, even though only 9% is actually destined for a US company. That means 30% of all transactions going out of this continent are wasted through an inefficient corridor because it's a tough continent to do business on. We don't have a lot of new entrants. It's really tough to get investments, and we don't have a lot of innovation. So now you have a plucky person thinking about, well, what if I had a decentralized tool that I could use to innovate and get around this bottleneck and open up this market and become the first, well, almost like a node, reaching out to the rest of the world saying, trade with me. I will make a market for you. If you, anywhere in the world, want to trade with us in Kenyan shillings or Nigerian naira, I will do so. And guess what? I don't take USD. I only take Bitcoin. And that's how we started in 2013. Our first transaction was from a really cool Canadian who had an avatar of a pot leaf, but I didn't put that in my investment pitch deck. And he sent me 500 Canadian dollars in Bitcoin, and I made a market for him in local currency. And that's where we got started. And from there, we moved up from the retail sector into businesses. And now we're really providing a solution to make a direct market between African currencies and the rest of the world. So they pay in local African currencies. If I own a bank account, like I do in Luxembourg or the UK, I can make a market directly. If I can't, I'll ask my friends sitting in Beijing to make that market for me, in Tokyo, in Brazil, in Mexico, around the world. All the places where we trade digital currencies, I suddenly can have access without having a Credit Suisse Nostro account, without having that heavy infrastructure. It's using technology, it's solving a problem, and it's servicing a market that nobody else was even caring about. So we started in Kenya. We expanded across the region. That's 12 books alone to talk about all the things we went through to do that. To Uganda, Tanzania, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, which is an incredible place, and now finally Senegal, which is the capital of the West African Monetary Union. We were the first market maker between digital and African currencies, although I think BitX might contend us. Well, we were at least within a month. And we were the first bridge between mobile money, which, as I said before, was the debit card of the region, and digital currencies. And it was kind of hard to convince these African regulators what we were doing. The first time I went into these meetings at the central banks, they were looking at me like, what spaceship did you step off? What the hell are you talking about? But then I would start to talk to them about, well, it's more transparent. You can reclaim money that's going through the black market. You can connect this to other systems around the world. It gives you freedom from these monopolies that are controlling what's happening in your market. And when we went to the UK, and especially Luxembourg, we were welcomed with open arms. Now, it was a few years later, and a lot of other companies, including some people here in this room, had already been there before us. But it was great. We were the first company of our kind to get an authorized payment institution license from the UK. We hold that today. We work really closely with the Financial Conduct Authority, which has been awesome. And we've been helping to bring these global standards to the African markets and showing that just because we're innovative, because we're cheaper, because we are decentralized, we're not controlled by these African central banks, we actually bring them a lot of value. We're promoting their local currencies. And now, even though we only make a market directly in those little green countries, we can trade with partners all around the world. And the beauty is, the map keeps getting bigger. And as everybody here starts building more and creating more, the map continues to grow. And it's been really exciting for us. And for anybody in the room who still wants to talk about compliance, it's the first question and it's the last question, and then it's the next question the morning after. But we always have the same answer. We're not reinventing the wheel. It's really easy to do compliance. It's a problem you put money at, and it's solved. And I don't know why this question just people can't get their heads around it, and they just, but what about the compliance? It's not that hard. Everybody takes the same compliance data and passes it along. In fact, it's passed more efficiently. And as I was talking to Laurent and some of the people working on the AML KYC issues in the world, we actually have more compliance data than a lot of the other payments, banking, and mobile money providers in our region. And we're willing to share that, and we have it in a shareable form. And that's also exciting, and it's also bringing something to the table. And again, as we said before, we're making it easy to do business in Africa. We make it really easy to kind of go in through digital currencies and then out through multiple currencies. And this is our team. We are now based in every major time zone in sub-Saharan Africa. We have offices in Nairobi and Lagos and in Dakar, in London and Luxembourg. Nobody likes to go to the Luxembourg office. It's way less fun. But we've been building this since 2013. We'd love to work with you guys if you're interested in seeing what we've done with our customers, with our products, and expanding across the region. And we're excited to be the first. It's been a lot of hard work, but we couldn't have done it with a lot of the help from the community. So thank you.